Hey, hi, hello, welcome to episode 87 of Trail Society, produced by Free Trail, brought to you by our friends over at the feed. I'm Corinne Malcolm.
I'm Keely Henninger.
And I'm Hillary Allen. I'm back.
The band's back together,
Wow, I
team.
even went out of order because I was used to the last two episodes with you not here. I'm sorry.
I know. I've missed you guys. I hope you guys have been doing an amazing job, and I'm very happy to be back. I had some family things, stressful life things. So you guys held down the fort. I missed you, but you
Yeah.
did obviously a fantastic job. But I'm back. Yay.
I can't wait until 2024, 2025. It's 2024. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Like I said, brain's not working. I can't wait until 2025 when we can like talk about some of the things that we are all currently going through because it is a very unglamorous yet very stressful time of the year for, let's call it, a third to 70% of your favorite trail and ultra athletes who are
Oh
in
yeah.
in in and around contract
A
negotiations.
third to
So,
70%. Never felt like that was more indicative.
It's
right?
well, yeah.
Just a
No,
That
it's
seems
40%
true.
range. It's fine.
I
yeah.
honestly, I think that episode might have to be under a special listeners membership thing because it might get, at least from my part, a little bit of like expletives and things.
We
It'd be
can
a
do
long
a
episode.
Patreon only for one episode. One time only Patreon subscribers can
Or we'll
hear us
just do
vent.
it kind of like a liquor store online does and say, "Are you above 21 years old?" Because otherwise, don't listen to this because the language is explicit.
Yeah. Well, we
Yep.
won't be doing that today, but we are all currently working our way through an unglamorous phase of running careers, and we are hanging in there. Very thankful for the people in our lives that keep the rest of our worlds going. Our support systems, our friends, our family, the people in our corner that are helping us ride out this fun time of life.
I
It
think we
sounds
should
like
reframe it as not unglamorous, but as very glamorous, personally.
very glamorous, very
Very glamorous because we're seeing who
TMZ.
our, who our real support systems are, and we're getting to like test them out and like rely on
Oh,
them. How
That's what
about
it
that?
is. We're testing out all of our support systems. Well, we're doing something, and hopefully 2025 has good news from all of us. And I know that we're all working on exciting projects too, so we'll hopefully get to actually tell you guys about that in like, I don't know, maybe like 5 episodes away. So you bear with us, okay? But until then, the other thing besides our support systems that are getting us through this trying time are just like cupboards and cupboards full of snacks. Personally, lots of caffeine, lots of snacks, and because of that, we have to give a shout out to our title sponsor, our friends over at the feed. I could not do anything I am doing right now without a waffle in hand, I'm pretty sure. They are my emotional support waffle product of choice. I pop it in the toaster. It makes me feel a little bit better about life. What are you guys snacking on?
I'm more of a heat recovery. Like, okay, so I've got two things. I've been trying to up my protein content because I've been doing some more like road running and speed workouts. And so the one in the morning that I'm doing is the iced coffee one from Ascent Protein.
hmm.
I really
Haven't
like
heard
it.
of it. Sounds good.
Yeah, it's actually it's really good. So yeah, Ascent Protein, but it's like their, I think I don't know, it was like maybe a special edition. I think they still have it, but it's like the iced coffee one. And then I still have my bag. I haven't finished it yet. But then in the evening, I'm a big tea drinker and like warm, and I feel like since it's dark at like 5 p.m., I should start drinking warm things now. Um, so I'll have like a chocolate or vanilla one that I like to add to either my tea or just like drink warm.
A little hot cocoa action.
Yeah,
Mhm.
hot
I
cocoa
dig it.
protein.
What about you, Keely?
I've also been doing the waffles per usual, but I've also been stocking up my locker with goo Stroop waffles. And
Mm.
just like those are such clutch little things that if I'm running after studying, they always sit well. So they're like so easy to eat. You can take them with you to school. Unlike the waffles, I don't have access to like my own personal freezer. At least I don't think I do. Maybe I do. And so those are easier. And then because I know a lot of you don't like oatmeal, but I know some of you do, I've been doing the new Kodiak cakes oatmeal packets, the little packages. It's quite nice.
Mm.
I'm a sucker for the kind of like original like Quaker Oats oatmeal. So for me, they're perfect. Like the less organic tasting, the better to me, which is not like kosher, but these taste amazing. Like it's like black maple brown sugar. There's like an
Mm.
apple cinnamon one. They're amazing. So I highly recommend. They taste way better than like Quaker that you can get at the store. And so highly recommend.
The OG oatmeal flavor is making a comeback. I like it. 90s fashion is back. OG Quaker oatmeal flavors are back in the Kodiak oatmeal. We are all about it. If you also would like to try the Kodiak oatmeal or some cool protein products or waffles or whatever your snacking needs to get through the dark time that many of us are experiencing, you can go over to www, there we go, .thefeed.com/Trail Society. And there you can get a $20 credit every single quarter, $80 over the course of the year. Again, that's www.thefeed.com/Trail Society. And if you're watching this on YouTube, because we'll eventually get this up there because we're gonna have to make our own YouTube channel. Bear with us. You can get a cool water bottle, and they're really sick. I'm holding it for those of you who are listening on a run right now and can't see. If you're on a run right now, it's a pretty good time to have a snack. So take a snack out of your pocket right now, eat a little something. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna jump into results because while the year is winding down, the results are winding up in a big way. There are some really cool results that happened over the last 2-ish weeks. Some more things that will happen between us recording this on Monday, November 11th, and it coming out next week. But the first one I want to give a shout out to is Courtney expletive Olson, Bellingham's own, broke the 50-mile world record at Tunnel Hill in the 50 mile. The time, the official world record time for the 50 mile has stood since Ann Trayson's 1991 5:40. Courtney
Mm,
ran a 5:31:56, taking over 8 minutes off of Ann's mark. Camille Herron had what they kind of deemed an unofficial 50-mile world record in about 5:38 and change. Courtney, once again, well under that, and she accelerated in the final 5K. Devin Yanko and I were messaging each other, and we were pretty convinced she was going to run 5:34 on the nose, and she broke our expectations by over 2 minutes. So, Courtney Olson, what a phenomenal year. This and Comrades'
mm,
third place debut back in June. Like, while they're not quote unquote traditional trail performances, like they're setting up to be like my Troy ballot, my Ultra Runner of the Year ballot is getting to like starting to look a little bit interesting when someone with this type of road talent shows up multiple times over the course of the season. So we'll see her race 100K Road
mm,
Worlds before the end of the year,
mm,
and that will be super cool. The other thing that happened at Tunnel Hill in the 100-mile race is that Julia Hamulecki, I don't know if I'm saying your name right, was the first female, third overall Canadian gal, broke the Canadian 100-mile record by 75 minutes, running
Whoa.
13:32:07, I believe. Um, just really, really fast. Yeah, just unbelievable. Super, super impressive. Have to give her a huge shout out. The other Canadian who did something really crazy in the last 10 days. I don't know if you guys know Nicole Abma lives in, I think she's actually technically like South African, but she lives in Canada. So we're giving her the Canadian citizenship treatment. Trains in like in the Canmore area with Arden Young, who also ran really well this past weekend. Nicole was won the women's race at Rio de Lago,
Mm.
running 16:26, like by herself, basically. To set the record there. I want her to get her butt into a golden ticket race so badly because she's got wheels. So, Nicole, I don't know if you listen to this or not, but your other Canadian friends do. So, Jenny Quilty, help me get Nicole into a golden ticket race. Um, I'm just gonna keep going because I'm on a roll. UTMB Mallorca and UTMB Puerto Vallarta were two big races that happened in the last 2 weeks. Mallorca was hampered by horrible weather. They had to cancel both the 100K and the 100-mile qualifying races. But the 50K did get off the ground. They moved like people who were there for the 100K and 100-mile who weren't elites didn't get to like jump into the 50K. Like they just didn't get to race that weekend.
Mm.
Weather happens. It's really hard to move that many people from one race distance to another. Some of the elites did get to move and race the 50K, like Martina Valmasoy. So just want to give a quick shout out to the women's 50K podium there because I thought it was really cool. Um, Rosa Larafuli won in 5:10. The US's Bailey Kowalczyk ran 5:15. Like this is, I think, one of her longest races to date. Really, really cool to see her like figure some stuff out this year. She's running so freaking strong. So to see
Mm.
Bailey finish second was really cool. And then Martina Valmasoy finished third in 5:23. UTMB Puerto Vallarta just happened. And while there were some men that ran phenomenally good times, we're going to talk about the ladies. And so just wanted to give the winning women's shout outs because they were phenomenal in the overall fields as well. Well, Sarah Alonso came over to run the 50K. I think she tied for second
Yeah.
overall. Like technically her and the second place male have the same finishing time. She beat David Norris, and David Norris is like super freaking talented. And he finished like two
Yeah.
minutes behind her. Like it was
Yeah.
wild. So
I
Sarah
didn't even
Alonso,
look for her up there. I was just like, oh, she must have dropped out or something because I looked for first place woman and saw the girl that got second, who was also like top 10 or so.
yeah.
They were like 12th maybe. And I was like, wow, that's pretty good. This girl got 11th and got first. And I was like, wait, she's second? What?
Yeah. So Sarah Alonso crushed. Similar things happened in the 100K and 100 mile. Arden Young, we just mentioned before, crushed the 100K. She won the 100K by like 2 hours or something. She finished, I think, I want to say
Whoa.
seventh or eighth overall. Um, Heck yeah, like super cool to see her pull that out. She's been training in the snow, and ice and cold up in Canmore, so that was very cool. And then Alyssa Clark, who is a world class crusher, super good. And like the harder the race, the more afraid I am of Alyssa Clark. Didn't have her day, like the day that she wanted at UTMB. She finished just outside the top 10. But I think she finished fifth overall in the 100 mile at Puerto Vallarta
Amazing.
and ran away with it as well. Like was well ahead of the rest of the women in the race. So just want to give Alyssa Clark a huge shout out. Moving on, New York City Marathon, super random. We're not here to talk about the winners because they ran really fast. It's really cool, but got to give some trail and ultra human shout outs. CJ Albertson, who like can't be stopped, ran I think his third world marathon major this year and like ran another like 2:10 or
Yeah.
something. So
Most
super stupid.
consistent guy out there.
Yeah, Brooks homie, so Hillary can give CJ some extra love, but so strong. No one else can do what CJ does. Um, Maybe if he raced less, he raced less, he would be better. Maybe not.
Or
Or not.
maybe if he
Yeah.
got into ultras. I'm just kidding.
He
Yeah,
has
no.
gotten into ultras, hasn't he? Doing a 50K?
He has
He
did
has
like
the
the 50K
50K.
world record.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I want to see him maybe run Tunnel Hill 50 mile. So
Yeah.
Mr. CJ Albertson, we've got some other things that you could run if you want. No pressure. You're running very well and making a lot of money running road marathons. There's no reason to come to the trail quite yet. Um, MK Sullivan, though, also ran because Kraft was doing a bunch of cool stuff there. I think she she's like her posts have been really wonderful 'cause she's like, I won the New York City Marathon. And I think it's because she wasn't in the pro field and she was in the mass start field. And I think she won the mass start, which is so
Nice.
Mhm.
wild and cool.
It's so
But
fun.
even cooler, she ran 2:36
Dang.
New York. That's
at
fast.
New York. That's
Mhm.
really fast. So baby's got wheels. MK
Yeah. The trail
Sullivan.
speed coming over. New York's a hilly marathon.
Yeah, particularly because she's gone up in distance this year too for trail stuff, right? Like she's done a number of 100Ks
Mhm.
this year, not just sticking in that kind of 50K and below Golden Trail World Series stuff. So cool to see that kind of like fatigue resistance play out in the marathon, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit later. And then the last thing I want to shout out, it's happening right now as we speak. It'll be done by the time this comes out. Georgia Porter has been like low key absolutely throwing down on the Arizona Trail right now.
Mhm.
Going for the supported FKT. Again, it's like an 800-mile FKT. So this is no joke. As of today, she's on day 14 and should have less than 100 miles left to go to get to the Mexican border. It's phenomenal. The current record I think is like 17 and a half days or something like that. So like it might be, I don't think it's gonna be quote unquote tight unless something happened today that I'm unaware of, but she's gonna be under that mark and it's a
Cool.
hard FKT. So Georgia Porter, you're just an absolute monster.
She isn't so kind.
Yeah, and she's a wonderful human. It turns out they're all
Mhm.
freaking wonderful humans too. It's annoying. They're talented and they're nice. Like it's not fair. It's not fair. Any other results that we missed that people want to add? And if we missed your results, slide into our DMs. Let us know what your friends did. Let us know what you did.
I had an
We'll
athlete go back to Ultra or UTMB Puerto Vallarta after DNFing last year, and she finished this year under the cutoff by like a couple of hours. So she beat
Wow.
it. It was her like arch nemesis in the trail world because she was like, I didn't know a race could be that technical and humid.
Yeah,
Which
it was
yeah,
really
the trails
humid.
are gnarly effort and yeah, super humid. So congrats to her. I was stoked.
That's
That's awesome.
huge. Okay, I pulled some news. They're not too crazy. The first one I do have some questions for you guys on because I thought it was like kind of interesting. And it's a piece that came out in Outside. We're highlighting a couple Outside pieces today, but this actually came up in a newsletter that I subscribe to, and it's basically about how often should you replace your sports bra. And we've heard things like sports bras shouldn't have birthdays, etc. At the same time, I know each and every one of you has a sports bra that's probably like maybe not double digits years old, but they're old, right? Like you've had them for a long time. And it's because they're your
Mhm.
favorite or they're lucky or you can't find like they stopped making that kind and it's like the best one you've ever had, right? Like we all have that sports bra. There are people listening right now that have a sports bra from college, from high school, from whatever, right? And it's like, so hearing that sports bras maybe shouldn't have birthdays could be a little bit alarming. But basically, it breaks down some of the current research and then talking to product designers, for example. And so basically, bras lose elasticity over time. And that's particularly true of like medium to high impact bras. You're using them for high impact activities like running. They're gonna like, and you're washing them, etc. They're gonna lose their like some of that elastic, like the elastic principle of them versus lower impact bras that you're using for yoga, cycling, skiing, etc. They actually hold up a lot better because the use of them isn't as aggressive. And then a quote from the article, and this is actually why I have given up on a few bras that I have that are older for this reason. It says the loss of elasticity can over time cause your sports bra to be less supportive. That's not my main concern. But they say this may cause your breast to excessively move around or sag, which can be particularly painful during high impact activities. She goes to add that when the fabric or seams of an older sports bra deteriorate, you can experience chafing or skin irritation under your arms or along the bust line. This is especially true during intense or prolonged workouts. And I had like not chafed in forever. And then I was like on some random long runs and I like kept chafing on these long runs. And I realized that I was running an older bras that had like micro damage to the elastic and was causing chafing. And so they go on to say that like you should wash your bra if you're washing your bras once a week, you might need to replace them once, if not twice a year,
Dang.
That's not
which is
affordable.
crazy,
Yeah.
right? That's not sustainable for anyone. They're an
Yeah.
expensive
Shame
piece of
on the
equipment.
bra maker. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing you can do to extend the life, and then I'll open the floor, is to make sure that you're washing them in colder water, using a mild detergent, and then hanging them dry, not putting them in the dryer.
Mm.
So if you're drying your sports bras, you probably want to hang dry them. And if you're washing them in warm or hot water, you might want to consider washing them in cool water, to prolong their life and happiness. So I'm wondering, hearing that information, besides being frustrated that that's a lot of money going out into the world. How do you both feel about that? Keely, you've worked in-house at a to be named or not
Mhm.
producer of sports bras and other apparel. Like, how do you feel about those statements?
I mean, I think there's probably a lot of validity to them, especially when you're in the medium to high support bra for a larger busted women or for larger busted people. But I think as someone with small boob privilege or not privilege, depending how you look at it, it does not apply to me. I have bras that are 8 years old and I don't notice a difference. But again, I think I say that as someone who doesn't really need the support of a bra. But when we did test bras that were older versus not so old, they do show a little bit of differences in movement. So I think that there's definitely some validity to this. It's just a matter of how much movement that is. And from the testing we've done, it's not that much movement. And oftentimes it's not perceived. So I think, again, it's like dependent on the bra. I think most of the bras might not be as drastic of changes over just like 50 washes or something as you might think. But I do think probably people need to replace their bras more than they think they do. And unfortunately, that's really expensive. So I think thinking of other alternative solutions would be great because that's not reasonable for a lot of people.
Yeah, or maybe you're
Yeah.
like you're recycling your higher impact bras to become your lower impact bras,
Mm-hmm.
or again, like the reason why I've gotten rid of any bras because I've had enough micro damage. Not that it's creating support issues, but
Yeah.
it's creating
Yep.
chafing.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
happened to some athletes of mine too. Yeah.
Hillary, what's kind of your take when you hear this and your personal sports bra experience?
Yeah, so I mean it's kind of it's the same like as what Keely said. Like I maybe don't notice as much just because I do have smaller breasts, but the thing is that I also, I mean, I have a sarcastic comment too. It's like, this is like where van life comes in handy, where I'm like, washing my
I'm not
book.
washing stuff.
Exactly. I'm not washing stuff, I'm washing in super cold water. But no, I mean, so it's just, I mean, but I do have a history of, breast cancer in my family. So it's, like making sure that like that's like regular checks and stuff. And I know like we're talking about, you have to like acute tissue damage, right? I'm not sure if that's actually correlative to what we're discussing here, but like just kind of I mean, I think it's important for women to be aware of, or people to be aware of, that this on our bodies. So I mean, it's like it doesn't surprise me, but it surprised me is how much fabrics actually break down in washing and drying. So it's like being more cognizant of how you kind of like handle those higher, like more like expensive price points, like
Mhm.
articles of clothing. But yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't know.
I know.
I,
I
s-
think
I feel like if I don't do laundry enough, like with my sports bras, that causes chafing issues too. So I should not
The,
do that.
the, the salty bra is not going
yeah.
to do you any favors.
I know. I think I should take a page from my mom's book where she like would do laundry with like the right colors, the right kind of materials all go together. They do the certain
Yeah, yeah,
like temperatures. I don't do that. But I probably should.
yeah.
Yeah,
Everyone
we
should.
yeah. We do our dryables and our non-dryables, and that's how we so it's mostly athletic clothing get washed together and
hmm
everything else gets washed
Yeah.
But
together.
I
I have
do have that like higher impact, like because I do like a lot of cycling, and I don't
mm,
need the same kind of bra for that or for like weightlifting and stuff like this. So it's like I definitely have like already just like the ones that I wear for that and the ones I wear for
mm,
running. So yeah, it could be interesting to kind of like have two separate piles.
Yeah. Divide and conquer in the bra world. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. I've been told
mhm.
that bras shouldn't have birthdays, and I was like, oh, I didn't break that rule. And this like continued to support that idea. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to throw that out there. If you want to read it, it's over at it actually came out on Halloween. But it's not a joke, over at outsideonline.com. And it's just titled How Often Should You Replace Your Sports Bra?
It's
So
not a joke, but it's kind of spooky.
it's kind of spooky. Um, no puns intended. Okay. The other piece of news that I wanted to bring to the table was covered and reported by The Gist this week about involving Whoopi Goldberg, of all people. And so it says Whoopi Goldberg stopped by The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon to announce her big plans for professional women's sports. She's launching the first global women's sports channel, the AWSN, the All Women's Sports Network. And then she goes on to say, we're growing fast. We've already launched in Asia, the Middle East, India, on Jio TV, and we've got big announcements about our US launch coming next week. So while this podcast is coming out, and she then went on to say, everything from soccer, basketball, tennis, cricket, curling, you name it. If a woman is playing it, we are showing up. We love to see it. So keep your eyes out, I guess, for the AWSN. Like I'm kind of curious to see what comes of it, like pending the US announcement, where is that being streamed? How is it available to us? We live in the world of like a bajillion different streaming platforms. Is it going to be included in the Peacock bundle, the Hulu bundle, the Apple TV bundle, the whatever bundle? Or what do you need to do to get your hands on it? So very curious, but it also makes maybe the jobs of people like Rough and Tumble and the Sports Bra a little bit easier if they have an AWSN network channel that they can just like have on their TV at all times.
hmm
So I was very excited when I saw that news.
Yeah. And I mean, she said she wanted to start it because she felt like her gender prevented her from being encouraged to pursue sports like as a little kid. And it always like pissed her off. And so now she's like, you know what? We can have baseball cards of women and we can have sports magazines featuring women so that it will show those little girls in the world that athletics can be done by anybody and it doesn't
Yeah.
matter
I
who's
love
doing
that.
it. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those questions that we're asking ourselves right now in trail and ultra running in a lot of ways where again, the reason people do athletics as adults is because they identify as an athlete because they played high school sports. Well, what countries in the world have high school sports? The US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. Like most of Europe, they're club sports. It's a whole different program. It's after school. It's not just like part of the school system. Um, and so you have a population of women and men, but I'm focused on the women here who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, etc., who don't see themselves as athletes, who don't see themselves as runners. And in part it's tied back to like not having that kind of ingrained into you as like a 14, 15, 16-year old. And so things like this, like the AWSN, like I think it being already launched in Asia and the Middle East and India is super cool too, because
Mhm.
in those countries we see way less. I've been to an ultra in India. I'm going to a ultra in Japan this week as like kind of part of a PR team. And I looked at the 50K start list last night, and it's the start list is like all in all 16 pages long. And the male athletes make up 12 or 13 of the 16 pages.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then it's like page 14, 15, 16 is the women's participants. So like I can't tell you the exact numbers, but I can tell you like based on pages,
Mhm.
that's overwhelmingly male. And that's in the 50K distance. That's in one of the shorter distances of the race weekend. There's a 30K, a 50K, a 100K, and a 100 mile. And the 50K has like 2 pages worth of women versus 14 pages. So it's cool that the AWSN is already launched in a lot of those communities, because I do think that the reach there is even maybe more important than the reach in the US.
Mhm.
So Whoopi Goldberg, I'm your new biggest fan. Okay. Are we ready for
Yeah.
the protein and carbs section of this? The tofurkey and sauerkraut?
Guys,
The
we got a lot of graphic designers sending us pictures of potatoes after our last couple episodes saying like, here for the potatoes, the little cute potatoes with sneakers on. So I think the potatoes has to stay for sure.
Okay, so we're potatoes and tofurkey based products, or Steven's currently braising something upstairs. So there's meat products floating around as well. But the potatoes, you're here for the potatoes. We're here for the potatoes too. Um, we talked about pulling from outside this week. We talked about our brains operating maybe not so great or operating on ultras. And that all kind of ties together into an article that came out, written by Alex Hutchinson, who, if you know anything about me, he is the person that made me want to pursue any sort of science writing and science communication, because he's been one of the guys for science writing, particularly in the sports world, particularly in the endurance world. So I read like everything he writes. Um, and he wrote a piece about ultra running, specifically about new research coming out of a backyard ultra event. The Backyard World Championships has happened recently, and I died laughing when I read the piece, because of course it's done by Belgian scientists. For those who are unaware, the Belgians are really, really good at the backyard ultra. They just ran 110 yards in the backyard world championships to set the world record. That's 110 hours times 4.176 miles. It's a lot. It's like way too much running for anyone. Anyway, so Belgian researchers last year at an event in Belgium conducted research on the participants, wanting to look at like physiological and psychological components of completing this event. And it's really like what's cool about the Backyard Ultra is that it's a field research opportunity, but it's very, very controlled, because the participants run one lap or one backyard or 1 yard or whatever every hour on the hour, and they start and finish in the exact same spot. And they have, 2 to 20 minutes before they run again. So you've got moments to test them, to check in on them every hour, every 4 hours, whatever you want to do. So it's kind of this like cool format of testing. And then on top of that, it's got a known extreme like mental component to it, because you don't have to be the fastest runner. You just have to be the last one standing. So there's like the physiological limiter is like not as much as part of the equation as like what's going on between your ears. So very interesting for those of us who are interested in the mental side of doing these things. So while this might not translate perfectly to other trail and ultra feats, because those of us sitting here in this online room of recording have not done a backyard ultra. We have not run for 64 hours straight, as far as I know. So I'm wondering, like, just before we dive into what they actually looked at and kind of the results from it, like, why might we be able to look at something like this and take anything away that's practical for like the quote unquote, I'm saying average, ultra athlete. And by average, I mean people who run 100 miles or less. Like, just like at face value, why do you think that any of this might be interesting?
Well, I mean, I think, and I mean, obviously this is an extreme, but it's like I think there can be you can learn something when you measure something to an extreme, especially if like the physical state, like the mental state, like you're kind of reaching a breaking like or an end point. And then although you are measuring an outlier, I think it's like I see it as like pushing someone to kind of their limits and then gathering data there to see if they can either keep going or not. So I think, I mean, any of that can be applicable because I feel like I ex probably, and maybe all of us have experienced probably the same set of emotions or doubts that people doing this race have, and maybe it's just like what we can learn from it is, they just have to do it multiple times, and so then what are they doing that we can then employ when we're running our, metaphorical big yards back ultra?
Keely, anything that you like think as like a research nerd going in, like how might this be a great example besides the fact that this is like the world's most intense volitional exhaustion test, right? Because we use that in the lab all the time. You can do a time trial, you can make the athlete go till volitional exhaustion, which normally doesn't take 64 hours like the study did, but like
Mhm.
it's the most extreme form of like what we actually use in labs. So I'm wondering where your brain went before we kind of dive into the takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a pretty cool environment to study because things are pretty controllable, right? So like they're able to see effort and then also see psychological status and see that like maybe the effort is not related. And so then I think you are pulling away from that the importance of psychological training and psychological stability kind of on your ability to persevere through these extreme environments, which is pretty cool, while also getting all the physiological variables, but in kind of a controlled manner because they're doing the exact same loop every single hour on the hour, right? But I think it's obviously pertinent to our sport because I think I've said this many times on here, but I'd rather have any athlete go into a race undertrained with a strong mind than overtrained without a strong mind or really trained without a strong mind because these races are always going to be hard, whether it's a 50K, 100 mile, big backyard craziness. You're always going to get to a spot where you are tired, your body hurts, you don't want to keep going, and your fitness is not going to carry you through that. And you're going to have to be able to fight through the mental side. And so, while, yeah, we're not all running every loop on the hour every hour, it's still very pertinent to all ultras because the mental side is super important.
Yeah. So what they found, like I like to classify most research findings as like well duh findings in the sense that it's like, well, that's the obvious conclusion, right? Like we knew that that's what was going to happen. So what they found was that the physical limits were, quote, not that remarkable, i.e.,
That's hilarious.
when they looked at results, right, like physiological things like heart rate, which they were recording, and blood lactate, which they were recording, were pretty stable the whole race. And it was not an indicator really of someone dropping out. There's like a little bit of heart rate stuff that they could conclude from that like maybe goes to exertion that we'll talk about later. But really it was like clearly the physiological tax is much lower than, us needing to evaluate VO2 max, lactate threshold, et cetera. And they did bring everyone into the lab ahead of time and they did those tests too, but that didn't really turn up anything. So they looked all of a sudden, they wanted to focus more than on like the psychological factors and then like sleep deprivation. Because again, when you're running every hour on the hour and you've got to cover a 4.167 mile loop, you have, again, generally speaking, in these races, 2 to 20 minutes before you're going back out to run again. So micro naps come in. No one's sleeping during these things, and they're not sleeping for many days. The people in the study ran between like 34 and 65 laps, I want to say. So again, that is 34 hours to 65 hours of not having sleep. That's probably more than about 10 minutes. So that's going to become a factor. They did cognitive, so basically reaction time testing. They did stuff pre-race as well in the lab, and they tested every 4 hours. And basically, they found no significant worsening during the race. And like from the text itself, it said the slowing effects of fatigue and sleep deprivation seem to be balanced out by the positive effects of exercise on brain function.
I think
The
this is
research,
crazy.
right?
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Actually, they found very similar things at Further, which I don't think is published yet.
Eh.
But very similar things were found during the 6 day event at Further. So it makes a lot of sense. The researchers kind of go on to say, like, while they remain stable during the event, the measures taken immediately after the conclusion. of the individuals run in the competition showed significant declines in cognitive ability. So exercise is essentially protective on cognitive decline during events like this.
Mhm.
So that's pretty cool. And there's some implications that we'll talk about here as well. Keely just typed in this could definitely apply to nurses and doctors. Yeah, it could
Well, I
apply to a
typed that
lot of
in, but
things. Oh, Hillary typed it in. We got stuff, people typing things in, but basically, like talking about this too, about like in long ultras, are long breaks then maybe a bad thing? So in 200-mile races type of thing, like would you maybe discourage athletes from taking long breaks at aid stations because of this cognitive change? Um, the other
Mhm.
one of the other key findings was fatigue resistance is actually quite important. So again, they said physiological stuff was not remarkable, i.e., heart rate and blood lactates were pretty stable. Um, but there was one thing that showed up in fatigue resistance. Fatigue resistance is called a lot of different things, just to set that out there. Durability, um, oh, they had another word, physiological resistance, etc. Basically, it's like how do you break down physiologically over time? Like how does you're running at a constant rate and your heart rate goes up because it's harder to maintain that constant speed, at a constant at a constant heart rate, your speed goes down because it's harder to maintain that speed at that given heart rate. So we see that decouple, and some cardiac drift is really normal, but that kind of like that decoupling to the extent that um, you're having to work harder and harder and harder to maintain the same effort did become a factor here. So for athletes that ran less than 34 laps or less than 34 hours at Bigs, they saw a larger change in effort and specifically in heart rate over the second half of the loops. So after, hour
Mhm.
16 or so. And that went up exponentially in the final quarter of those people's loops. So like let's
Until
say
they had to quit.
until they quit. So after about 24 hours or so, it went up a lot more. So the people that stayed in longer had less physiological change. So they had more fatigue resistance. Um, they were able to stay in it longer to that as well. Um, and then the like maybe the most important finding of the whole thing is about perceived effort and how that can impact how you perceive your effort can impact your performance. And so the quote from the article says the clear smoking gun from DePauw's data is actually much simpler. Subjective rating of effort, which was assessed on a scale of 6 to 20, which is the Borg scale, and it's dumb, and we use it in the lab all the time, and it's super stupid because who wants to rate anything from 6 to 20? But essentially, had the athletes rate it every 4 hours or every 4 laps. Effort is somewhat nebulous as a concept. A definition I like is that it's the quote, struggle to continue against the mounting desire to stop, which I like that quote. I love so much.
Mhm.
Basically, it's our brain's way of integrating all the different incoming signals from our body, our mind, the environment, how hard you're breathing, how fast your heart is beating, and how hot you are, but also how tired you are or how bored you are, and whether there are spectators cheering you on, and so on and so on and so on. So I love this idea that the key thing that differentiated the people who stayed in it the longest was their perceived effort. And I love that because there is something that we can control there a
Mhm.
bit, right? Like we get to choose how we're perceiving it. Yes, pain is a factor, et cetera, but we'll actually like maybe learn even more that they had another quote that basically spoke to that as well, which said that even in shorter efforts, it's usually effort, not pain, that maxes us out and causes an athlete to slow or quit. So, yes, like we're nodding along here. If your quads are cramping, these kind of things, like things that are getting progressively more uncomfortable or painful, are a factor, but they find that largely speaking, effort still supersedes that, and how you perceive effort supersedes that. So, we did not have data on the fueling and hydration from this study, and if that was a factor at all. Having seen athletes do this, they're most of them aren't even necessarily carrying something on the laps besides a water bottle, and they're fueling in that kind of in camp time when they're back to their crew tent. But I'm wondering here, since the largest factor is not speed, but it's what's between your ears, hearing all this, does it intrigue you at all? Can the Belgians talk you into testing your metal at a backyard? Keely looks disgusted.
Well, I think the first thing with this is like you have to really want to do it. It's like the like I mean, I would be
Yeah.
asking this question of like the surmounting like temptation to want to quit. That'd be like lap one maybe for me. So
You said before we hit record that friends are helpful in finding joy in things that you didn't think were enjoyable, all of road
Oh, it's
running.
true. It's true. We started this before we were, yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. But I mean, yeah, I guess you never know until you try. But I think I need some more convincing before I try. Because if
Yeah.
with all this, I think you with anything, you need to really want to do it.
hmm
Hmm.
I tell athletes that all
Yeah.
the time when they ask about training races, right? I said, you can do a training race. I'm happy to have you do a training race. I love training races, but I need you to really want to do that training race because it's not going to be very fun if you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Keely, what do you think?
Well, my thought is an absolute no, but I had a different thought around the actual study. And I think it'd be really cool to dissect their data a little bit more to see if those with a lower perceived effort scale had it throughout the entire thing and it corresponded with their pace. And those with the higher perceived effort, did it
Hmm
go up before they decided to drop out? Did it go up before their effort increased or after their effort increased? You know what I
hmm
mean? Like, are they related with their actual pace and heart rate as well? Because it'd be really cool to see like maybe the perceived effort went up before their actual physiological data went up too because of psychological stress, and then all of a sudden the running felt harder
I
too.
think from what I remember, most of the runners who made it past lap 34, there was very little change in their physiological data. Like, i.e., it wasn't like, oh, that lap was really freaking hard and
Right,
they
right.
then
Yep.
pulled. So
Yeah,
it's
no,
like,
I meant the earlier polars.
yeah, the
Yeah,
earlier
yeah.
pullers, like, there's
Hmm.
probably something more
Yeah.
connected there, right? Like, it got
Hmm.
hard and they were like, this is
Yeah.
hard
Hmm.
and I
Well,
want to be done.
the thing that I also think I know that they said that the like the data the physical limits are not that remarkable. However,
You
like
have to
it
average
is
like a
there
14:42
Yeah.
minute mile pace.
totally. I mean, so I get that. But however, I mean, we train athletes from all different levels, right? And it's just like you're trying to get them to be like relatively the most fit that they can be to reach a start line, right? And so it's like there still are going to be differences in fitness. I mean, and I know maybe like the predictability of like your VO2 max or all that stuff is not guaranteed like a first place or success is not predictive of results, but there still is a factor of that of like how well conditioned you are to keep going. But like in that also, it's like if you're in a better place physically to continue and keep going, do you actually get to practice that, like practice the listening to the voice, like, holy crap, this is hard. Okay, I still want to keep going. Right? Like there's a little bit of like practicing that is related to fitness. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like I
Hmm.
think that's a little bit of an interesting piece in this too, but I don't really know how you could really measure that. Like I would want to see is like the basically if there is a correlation to the people who are able to keep on going, like how many ultras have they done? And it might not be like might not be correlative because I know people who just like crush it on their first 100 mile or like, their first attempt at these things. But I think there's also like an ability to like practice it. That's something that I guess we'll talk about a little bit later, but like practicing these mindset techniques to keep going before you're actually in the situation, which is actually hard to do because you might not be able to reproduce the exact feelings that make you want to quit or that fatigue.
I don't know. Have you done VO2 max intervals? Like that's a pretty good workout to practice wanting to quit in because I tell athletes all the time that if they're pacing their VO2 max intervals right, they should question being able to finish the workout.
Yeah.
Like they should maybe want to quit partway through every interval. And that's fine. That sensation's normal and it's going to come up and you're going to have the recovery that's equal to the interval and then you're going to go again. And maybe 80% of the way through the interval, you're going to be like, this is a horrible idea. I want to die. And then you're going to do the next interval. And it's like every single time you say yes to the next interval, you are practicing that. And it's not about how fast you're running, it's about the effort of those things. And so it's like, I do think that we have opportunities to practice that without physically harming athletes or setting them up into dangerous or scary scenarios. Like we don't have to go old school and be like, I want you to blister your feet and I want you to start with sand in your backpack and I want you to start with wet socks. Like we don't have to do any of that. Like showing up to train when it's dark outside because the time changes happen and you've got to run before work, like running when you've like maybe you didn't sleep super great and your kid's sick, but you're gonna get your workout in and you feel okay, but you really like would rather like sit at home on the couch with some tea or something. That's practicing this. Um, Like getting the workout done when it's absolutely horrible outside, or you're like me and you hate the treadmill and you have to do the workout on the treadmill because it is absolutely horrible outside. Like those, I think they're not lap 67 of a big's backyard, but they are opportunities to say, yes, I think I can do this. So there's other ways to practice it that we'll talk about more, but I do think that there's something like weirdly intriguing and engaging about this like setup of Big's backyard because it's set up by a mad genius who is kind of maybe a questionable human being, but like what an ingenious, weird event that makes people really kind of question those things in a safe and otherwise safe and like protected environment. Like they're not going to get lost. They're not going to fall down somewhere weird. Like it's maybe like one of the safest ways to I don't know, have to ask yourself this question. So that is super interesting. But I want to talk a little bit more about those ideas. So again, like fatigue resistance specifically and perceived effort and how we can maybe apply some of the things that were talked about in the study to our own training, working with our own athletes, etc. And like the first one that I'll bring up is that like long breaks or rest during ultras that do not include sleep might make cognition worse. So athletes that I have that are doing the Triple Crown or doing Moab 240 or Coconut 250, like I might make choices in those races or even like UTMB folks that are going to take 40 to 42 hours, right? Like I might have them make choices that are a little bit different when it comes to cognition because it seems like exercise and continuing to move is protective of that dysregulating, and stopping for a while might create worse feeling in that regard. So I'm wondering what else you guys might be taking away from this very weird niche research.
I mean, I think for me, it's just reminding myself and my athletes that even when you are tired and you think your cognitive ability is lower, that maybe it's not. And maybe you need a snack, or maybe you just need to remind yourself that you can keep doing these things and that the brain is like willing to work with you while you're running these crazy things. That stat is maybe the craziest thing that stuck out to me in this whole study.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
I think too, it's like I always think back, we've talked about this before, like stress is stress. So it's like if there's like limiting the things that like stress you out either before a race or being able to kind of like tackle those like during training itself to not like let those surmount or kind of become like occupy big spaces in your mind because they will come out kind of and help have you question these things. I mean, I think that's like some of the most important work of like working with the sports psychologist or like having a good community around you to be able to like talk through these things. Because I think that I think can add to this whole your ability to actually work through those low moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Stress, stress, stress. Like I think Keely said it really well earlier. Like she'd rather have an athlete go in, undertrained, but mentally super solid, than perfectly trained and like mentally fried or not having a well to dig from. One thing that I thought like that still sticks out to me again is that like that quote, the struggle to continue against the mounting desire to stop. And it kind of, I think to me, refreshes this idea that like these activities are hard and it is normal to be presented with a desire to stop. And while we cannot control everything, there are a lot of things that we can control. How we react to adversity, how we perceive our effort and intensity, how we make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And I think that like you can impact your perceived exertion a lot with just like things that we're going to talk about, positive self-talk, belief, I don't know, not making big decisions on an uphill where it is harder, right? Like maybe waiting until the downhill where things are a bit more fun. Um, but like we've all gotten into races where we've gotten in a funk and we've all spent too much time trying to get out of them, right? Like some of my best races are the ones where it's like I had a low and I got myself out of it quickly versus like I hated mile 30 to 45. Like that's not a good thing, right? Like in your 50 miler. So I do think that this idea that perceived exertion has a massive impact on your ability to stay in it. And I'm not just talking about like, oh, you perceive the exertion to be like an 8 out of 10 on the RPE scale, and that's threshold effort for you or whatever. I'm talking more about like your sensations to your experience of working hard and deciding that you're like into it, I guess, is the biggest thing, right? Like you can still hurt, you can still suffer, it can still be hard, but I think we get to choose to like be like, well, I paid for this and I signed up for it and I'm excited about it. Um, and have a positive relationship with those what we might otherwise perceive as negative things. So I
Yeah.
think that's what I'm working on when it comes to like trying hard more than anything.
Yeah, and I mean, I love these topics because this is obviously something that I'm like really interested in. I feel like we each bring like unique perspectives to this podcast, and like, mine's more like the mindset stuff, like from my neuroscience work in grad school. But like, I mean, I think and it's interesting because I feel like, just talking about this, and then I pulled a couple articles, which, we can link to the show notes too, if you guys are like more interested in what they're meaning, but to kind of like put the points home. Like it's great that what Alex Hutchinson in this article like posted out in this study for these these Belgians these Belgians that pointed this out for us. But like, how do we actually apply it to our personal life and running, right? Um, and there's a couple articles that I pulled. One that was just talking about this historical debate. There's been this debate in the field of psychology for a long time that like, does actually having high self-esteem help you, or is it just a form of narcissism? And like, does it actually just help the individual like to be happy, or can it actually have more like positive effects towards society? Like if you have high self-esteem, or more people that have high self-esteem, does it positively contribute to less crime, less substance abuse? Like, so there have been a lot of studies, and one article that I pulled was kind of this review, kind of talking about more recent studies with regard to self-esteem, and it shows that actually having higher self-esteem can include, well, it basically improves performance in school, in relationships, in works, in family life. And so that's like more general, right? If we're talking about just general like human health. But then the other article I pulled was talking about how more specifically that associates with athletes. And there was one in particular, and we've talked about several articles before, with recent studies about, if you guys remember it, I don't remember exactly which episode it was, but talking about um, positive self-talk before a VO2 max test, right? Like on a bike trainer. I think an article we talked about with that. But then the same idea with how positive self-talk can affect the actual performance of athletes. And there was a study that found that actually was worked with the Korean Shooting Federation. So like
Who are
professional.
baddies if you watch the Olympics, right? The
Yeah.
Koreans, they're style icons and they're very good at shooting guns.
Style
Mhm.
icons is for sure, but like, I don't know, like, don't you think that has to do with like positive self-talk too? It's like, I look good, I'm gonna perform well. It's like this
Totally.
whole idea. And I think there's a lot to it. And I was even practicing this, and I'm curious what you guys think too, of like, if you've even had this, like, I think it really applies to athlete, like positive self-talk, what's happening between your ears. It allows you to reach that next level. If you say, like, if you allow yourself to be in it, to be in the pain cave for those VO2 max intervals, and then like have like your pump up song, or like your pump up thing, that I can do this, like to just do one more and like be in the mile that you're in, and then like find ways to keep going, right? But then it also applies, like, it's such a feed forward loop because it also applies to outside of that, like in school. Like I remember in exam week, and like Keely, you're probably experiencing this now too, of like, do you even have little mantras that like I did this before, like before my master's thesis, like defense, I was like, had this whole thing of like talking to myself in the mirror. It sounds crazy, but these things do have effects, and there's research that's actually measuring it, that it does actually make a difference in performance for athletes across all different disciplines.
I have a question. The voice in your head that you use for self-talk, is it your voice or is it someone else's voice?
Ooh, this is a great question. And this is actually something that I've been working on because I've been leading some like mindset workshops with like some entrepreneurs and people who are like, how do I get to the next level? What I do is it's me talking to myself, but it's like alter ego me. If this sounds like I think it's useful to like have like almost this like maybe we all have it, but like, like Hillary and then like Hilly goat. Like, and for me, it's like easy to picture this because like the goats have like the crazy like slit eyes. If you ever look a goat in the face, you're just like, this is crazy.
Whoa.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's terrififying. So it's like I don't maybe like picture that in the mirror, but like I picture like someone else talking to me just to be like, it's like some outward me talking to me to like pump myself up. But it is a version of me, is what my point.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, like this idea, like, are you talking to yourself in third person? Is it like we are good? Like, okay, an example of something that I tell myself during intervals is I say, and it's weird. I say, it's not I'm good at suffering or Corinne is good at suffering. It's we're good at suffering. Like I talk, like it's like me and my self-talk are a unit. Like it's not like Corinne, you're so good at suffering. Like, let's go, Corinne, you got this. It's like we're good at suffering.
I like
And it's not I'm good at suffering. It's we're good at suffering. I just think it's interesting because everyone does it differently. And that is going to be my new icebreaker, maybe. But I'm curious, like, Keely, an example. Like, do you do this at all? Do you do this in workouts? Do you do this when you're on an easy run? Are you just a blank slate? There's nothing going on in there. Like,
she's
what's
just
ha
a Zen
or
master.
maybe it's like it's you're deep in a 50-mile race or Black Canyon 100K where you absolutely like destroyed all of our like expectations and goals and it was amazing. Like, do you like what is that voice? Is there a voice there?
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't call it Zen master because I'm not a Zen master, but I definitely don't really do self-talk. But I definitely do a lot of visualization and I do a lot of work on my own self-esteem, but I don't really talk to myself. I think I use more like this is what me and my therapist did for the MCAT because the MCAT is like pretty
Yeah.
mentally hard for me. It was during a time when I was like really unhealthy with eating disorder, really sick, was studying for the MCAT in undergrad. And so when I started studying for it again, it brought back all these like feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem, right? And my therapist and I's goal at the time was because what resonates for me is like numbers and time spent was to just quantify all the hours spent studying and like use that as a reminder that like you put in the work. So I guess that's kind of talking to yourself because you're showing yourself like what you've put in and that you're ready, but it's like lacking the conversational side, I guess.
Keely shows herself a deck. Keely's internal voice is like a deck presentation of like all the work she's done and with all the nice numbers and like an image of her running really fast. And mine is
Yeah.
like some like aggressive ninja human who's just like, we're
Totally.
good at
We've
this.
like some inspirational go. I don't even know. But this the point. It's like an I talk in yous. I say like I talk to myself like you are good at this. So I don't but I like the we thing. But I think all of it, this whole thing, I mean, it's like, but it's all a form of self-talk, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be
totally.
like the conversational thing. It is like I think the self-talk piece can then be interpreted individually, right? And it's I think that's where also like the practice piece comes in. Is like what is your version of a self-talk and how and for me like I really like writing that like that to me because when you write something down I feel like you're saying it in your head. Like mantras are really important for me. And that sometimes is just like, it's not even directed at me, but it's like just writing it down on the paper. So it's like just examples of finding your version of self-talk, but basically it does matter what you're saying to yourself, inside your head. And I do think it needs to have some sort of a positive, like uplifting thing because unless you're David Goggins, because I'm sure his like self-talk is like, you suck, man, and then it like keeps going. But like I don't think that works for most people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would
Yeah.
not work for me at
You're in
all.
an
That's
abusive
like my
relationship
negative
with your like, yeah,
decline.
yourself. You're like, I'm in an abusive relationship with my own mind, which I do think a lot of people probably
Mhm.
fall into that
Yeah.
category. But yeah, the power of mantras, the power of visualization, the power of yeah, these moments of practicing and building that kind of there's a you can there's like akin to like other surveys they use to quantify things in research. There's a survey in and around self-confidence, which is like the robustness of self-confidence score, which kind of like feeds into to the self-esteem piece, which then like feeds forward into what research uses now, which is a lot of like self-efficacy stuff. And so again, it's like using those experiences and the experience of others around you to also build your self-confidence and your belief that you can accomplish your goals. And one thing that I'm doing with a lot of athletes before races is just like we're going into training blocks or even like wanting to establish like a goal for this month or a theme for the month that we're entering is to like say those goals out loud, to write them down and then to say those goals out loud because I think I don't know, it just makes it so much more real, but not in I mean, that can feel scary, but I do think there's something really powerful of
Mhm.
sharing that with someone.
Mhm.
And like, I feel like my belief in that thing goes up exponentially as soon as I like share it, as soon as I like speak it into existence. It's obviously not manifestation. Um, but it kind of like, I don't know, it feels in that kind of same space.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's very spot on. I have an athlete repeat to herself while she's running that she's a very coordinated runner, that she's a very good trail runner because she's in a little bit of a spiral with falling on downhill trail runs. And so our goal is to like talk to yourself while you're doing it. Like you're very capable, you're a great downhill runner. And knock on wood, it's been mostly helping. We'll see.
I like that. I'm capable. I'm strong. I'm fast. I think that there's like, again, those mantras,
Mm.
that is definitely like a very prominent, it feels like form of self-talk.
Yeah. And now our version of self-talk, which is society slams.
Oh yeah. Let's slam. Okay. First off though, got to give a shout out to the folks at the feed. Again, I feel like we feel really fortunate that we've been working with them for almost 2 full years now. Kind of belief in us very early. We believe in their products. We believe in their kind of their ecosystem they've created as far as like getting to try new things. It's been super helpful for so many athletes to get to say, I get an athlete that says, I can't eat gels. I'm like, okay, what gels have you tried? Okay, so we're gonna go order these 12 other gels and we're gonna try them and we're gonna find something that works for you because we've got to figure this out. There's no excuse to not figure this out. And it is probably the most affordable way to deal with what is otherwise a very expensive industry, i.e. sports nutrition. And to ease that burden, to give you some extra snack cash in your pocket, you're going to want to go over to www.thefeed.com/society, and there you're going to get $20 of credit every single quarter to use towards snacks to practice with, snacks to stock your car, snacks to stress eat, whatever you need. They've got it. But let's slam. I want to read this first one because she also slid into my DMs separately, and I think it's really cool.
No.
Um, and it was really sweet. I got to message back and forth there a little bit, but they say, "Hey, hi, hello. I just wanted to share. After listening to episode 75, I was finally brave enough to go in and get some blood work done and check my iron. I found out my ferritin is at 2 and my total iron is at 19. Obviously, this is super concerning, so I saw a gastro specialist and I'm getting additional testing and help. We're trying to figure everything out, but they have tested positive for celiac, which explains so much, especially why training and nutrition plans simply have never felt effective for them when working at their absolute hardest. They wanted to thank us. They say, I want to thank you for all that you do to advocate for women's health. At 30 years old, I've been a lifelong endurance athlete, but it took your podcast for me to finally advocate for myself and find a doctor that would take my concerns seriously. I know I'm going to be resting for some time while my body recovers, but I cannot wait to get back to endurance training with this new knowledge. And that is so cool. Obviously, we can't give you medical advice because we're not doctors. There's no official. We got the closest we've got is a master's of science right now. So but we like this is so perfect. Like I'm so happy for like for them that they went in and they got the blood test and it turns out that they feel crappy for a reason and it's actionable and they can fix this and they're going to feel so much better. So it's just like my little heart nearly exploded when we got
Mhm.
this DM.
Yeah. Again, it's not like we're giving medical advice, but we're giving you the confidence to advocate for yourself, and that's all I can
Yeah,
ask for.
totally.
Yeah.
Number
All right,
two.
number two. Actually, Hillary, you should do number two, and I'll do number three.
Okay, cool. Okay, the second one. I know this isn't anything major, but I do some event logistics work. Listening to the pod, then asking my wife and her friends what they would actually need at aid station has meant, hopefully, we aren't just token covering things that actually provide what could be needed. Thought you might enjoy the photo of a 44 by 16 packs of tampons and pads. Male logistics worker added a bunch of tampons and pads to their local races. That's really cool. I love it.
That's
Sophie
super
Powers. I
sick.
hope she listens to this.
Yeah, that's really, really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's an easy thing, and you
Mhm.
might not need those products. They're very shelf stable, and
Very.
but it's gonna make someone who needs it, it's gonna make their life so much easier on that day. And I don't know how many times I've started a race without my period and gotten my period partway through, and it's like you can free bleed some, but it's also nice to be like, oh, I have a solution to this problem. So thank you so much for doing that. And talking to female runners about their needs and then like meeting them where they're at instead of just like being like, oh, I don't know what women need. These look like they're lemon flavor. Let's buy those. Like that's not, it's good that you're doing it right. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So number three is about waffles, and this one's going to require Corinne's expertise. We're just going to help out some listeners who maybe didn't quite understand how to make the waffle because I see some rookie mistakes here. So Corinne will help you after I read these two uh, snippets about waffles. So the first one's positive. I got a shout out from some ladies who train together in Washington, D.C. area who are training for the JFK 50, who are now all hooked on waffles. They sent over a couple pictures of them holding bags of them. It was great. Okay, then the biggest question, just so everybody knows, because we never talked about this, and I feel personally very sorry for this person because we never told you how to use the proper heating mechanisms. Okay, this person first message was SOS, how do I eat a waffle? The second one was the first time I ate one straight out of the bag right after I received them in the mail. The second time I let one thaw in the fridge after I had frozen them, and then I ate it without heating it up. What should I do?
Oh my goodness.
Toaster.
Toasters. Okay, we don't have like a proper we have a
Toaster.
toaster oven at our house. But yeah, toast those bad boys. They're meant to
Oh,
be
Yeah.
warm. I mean, you can just like eat them, but man,
The
they are
sugar like then
oh, it
like
like
caramelizes
caramelizes.
it.
Yeah. You want them hot. You want those puppies piping hot. And or at
Even in
least like
summer.
crispy. Yeah, hot waffles year round. I'm a hot coffee person year round. I'm a hot waffles person year round.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm so sorry to those of you listening to this at minute 80. Um, please, please, if you've made it this far, toast your waffles. It's really important. You will thank us later. And if you also made it to minute 80, you need to eat another snack. So stop what you're doing, except keep listening to us and pop some gummies or a gel or whatever you got into your little mouth. Keep on running. If you're also still listening to this, you should definitely go leave us a 5-star review and subscribe and tell all your friends that they're missing out if they are not yet listening to Trail Society. And I think with that, we'll see you next time out on the trails.